Welcome to Generations, a program for seniors, people who know seniors, or people who someday will become seniors. I'm David Lopaco, and I'll be the host for this episode of Generations. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce our co-host for the week. Our topic for today involves what are usually called end of life issues, including hospice care, end of life planning, dealing with grief and bereavement, and providing spiritual guidance and support. So it's kind of a heavy topic that way. So I thought in introducing our co-host that I'd get to a little lighter question to start. Warmer weather is around the corner. What are you planning to do to take advantage of that? And since Candy will often accuse me of not answering my own questions, I'll answer that question for me by saying I'm going to finally buy a golf cart, one that you can pull. I've been carrying golf clubs over my shoulder forever, and my shoulder's getting kind of sore from that. I'm going to buy a golf cart, and I want to get out on the links and start golfing. So that's my big plan when the weather gets warmer. Now, as to our co-host, Candy Pettiford. How are you today, and what are you looking forward to doing this summer?
I am great today. I'm great to hear about this subject. It's something that I'm interested in, and then just to live my life and just get with family in the summer.
Okay, and that usually becomes easier. People
Yeah,
come to the woodwork in the summer that apparently they're holed up in their house, and then you see them on the street or in their front yard. It's like they didn't exist for 6 months. So uh,
exactly.
I get that. Nadia Giordano is with us. Nadia, how are you, and what are you planning to do this summer?
I'm I'm going to get outdoors a little bit more. The last couple of summers I was laid up part of the time. I'm going to be doing a lot of walking in the sunshine.
Okay, excellent idea. And then finally, the lovely Rashida Jenkins is with us. And Rashida, how are you and what are you planning to do this summer? What are you looking forward to?
I am blessed, thank you. And I am looking forward to getting out in the yard and planting some flowers and maybe some vegetables.
Mhm.
All right. And are you one of those people who winds up giving neighbors more zucchini than they really want to have? Is that what happens by September? Yeah.
If the squirrels don't eat it first.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you to our co-hosts. And then our special guest for today is really someone who is very appropriate for this topic. And she is Anne McKenna Daggett, who is a great resource to discuss end-of-life issues. She has been a hospice chaplain, and she's currently a professor at Crown College in the ministry department. And so she has a lot of experience with end of life issues. She was born and raised in Kenya, moved to the US early in her childhood, which probably also gives her an intercultural perspective on this issue, which we could certainly talk about. So, Anne, welcome to the show. And why don't you start by filling out your bio a little bit with respect to your end of life counseling experiences?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I have been a chaplain for 18 years, actually since 2005. So once a chaplain, always a chaplain. I am currently not practicing because I'm going to school. I'm about to complete my PhD. So that's been taking my life. But it has been a great honor to serve as a chaplain for very many years. And actually, my dissertation is aimed towards end of care life. I have a great passion for end of care issues as well as caring for the elderly.
Okay. And what are some of the most common things that happen with people in their end of life phase that most people either don't think about or are not aware of or are surprised by? What can you tell us about things that we should know that we may not know about this whole process?
I think there's so much. I'm going to point out one major thing that tends to be a big problem and the hardest to resolve is regret. Regret is huge during end of life care. Um, it's discouraging. I think in the business of our lives, we can overlook a lot. We are able to move on and be busy and overlook a lot. But as we get older, our circles become smaller, and you realize that there's more time left to a person to think and reflect back. And it's during those periods of time that many are forced to sit back and look back. And regret tends to be a painful thing towards the end of life.
So what decided you to keep your dad, and not say, well, I'm going to put him in a nursing home, or I'm going to put him in a care center, or whatever. What decided you to keep your dad?
Yeah, so while my mother was alive, she had requested me. My mom knows, or she knew. She passed on in 2023. She knew that I was a hospice worker, and she has lived with me here in United States and got to observe me in some of my role, like officiating funeral, where I could bring her. And so she got to observe me in my role and to understand what I do for work. And so during her dying process, she depended on me a lot to make her decisions. So one of the major things is, if you talk with a lot of seniors, a lot of the elderly, they want to stay in their home. And a lot of people, when you ask them, they want to die in their home. And so I understand there is situations where families are completely not able to care for their loved one at home. So this is not to burden anyone. But if anyone is asked the question, the answer is usually, I want to die at home. That's not common in Kenya, because in Kenya, end-of-life care is not very talked about. People do not talk about death in Kenya, and that's the other cultural aspect. But I asked my mother, and I said, Mom, would you like to die at home? I had very candid conversations with my mother, and she said, I would love to die at my home. She had had really bad hospital experiences. So cut long story short, my mother died in her home, surrounded by her family, and she had a beautiful death. And that really helped with my grief. But she had also requested me to care for my dad. And so that's why I am caring for my dad. And it's just been such an honor. Like I said, I have a great passion for end of life, for caring for the elderly, and I'm an advocate for the elderly to die or to live with their loved one as much as can be done.
Thank you.
Going back to the issue of regret, if we could just finish that one up.
Yeah.
If regret is something that many people feel in that end of life phase, what do you tell them, or how do you work with them to get through that particular issue? Because I could see, I can really identify with the idea that at any point in my life, I wish I could have had a do-over on some things. What do you tell these people? How do you work with them so that they can manage the regret issue?
Right. So usually for most people, their faith helps them in coping with regret. So processing what their faith is, forgiveness, and especially the hardest thing is people don't know how to forgive themselves. Actually, people have easier time forgiving other people than they do have forgiving themselves. So working with their own faith to touch base with that place of self-forgiveness tends to help some. I'll say that it's a really difficult issue because there's many times that issue is unable to be resolved. And especially in issues of relationships where whether it's family, parents who are dying with estrangement with children, and we see extreme pain to the end, that there are situations that don't close up. For those that are not yet there, that are still living right now, today, my encouragement is, as much as possible, try to work on the things, and taking time to reflect and coming in touch with the things that wound your spirit, that are painful. Don't shovel them down. Don't ignore them. That's for those people that can take care of those things right now. Do as much as you can, whether it's reaching out with your relationships, trying to resolve them, coming to peace around where the relationships are. There are some relationships that are impossible, because relationships take two parties. And so there are relationships where people try and they can't resolve them. But oftentimes when you have done your best, then you can have peace in knowing that you did your best. So I think it's just encouraging people, don't just push things down, because time will come when everything will be glaring at you and you have nowhere, you're not busy, you have no way of covering it up.
Okay. Other questions?
Are there, what about other ways of comforting a person in the final days and months of their life? What are some other things that can be worked into this particular type of care?
Right. So as a spiritual care provider, because as a chaplain, that's my role, is spiritual care. However, even nurses and the other disciplines are always working towards the holistic approach of care. So we work at, of course, faith is huge, prayer, but one of the things that really also help is reminiscence. Reminiscence, so looking back and listening to people as they share their stories. So we ask people things like, what did you do for a living? And especially men love to talk about their work. It's a big piece of their identity. So we ask them what they did, how they loved their work, their role as fathers, for men who have been fathers. And then for women, women love their families. They want to talk about their family and their children and raising their children. And so reminiscence, looking back, is huge. We encourage families, whether it's adult children, to talk with their parents about their days raising them and telling them thank you. Pick specific situations that you can remind your loved one. Remember when this happened, and this is what that meant for me, and thank you. And this just tends to make the elderly smile, or whether it's even a sibling, and reminding them of the wonderful times that you had together growing up. That tends to bring a lot of comfort and enjoyment to people. Remember, the end of life and the dying process, it's not really about dying. It's about living. People still have a life ahead of them, even when they are diagnosed with terminal illness. So our goal as hospice workers is not to talk about death and talk about death and talk about death. Our goal is to help people live the best possible life that they can live with the remaining of their life. And so we focus on the things that bring joy to people in their journey.
That's a blessing. I was thinking as you were talking, is there ever a time where you create memoirs with people as you're sitting and listening to the stories that they're sharing and all of the wonderful things that they have done in their life? Is that something that the hospice may offer as a service to like create memoirs for the families to have after their loved one has passed on?
Yes, legacy writing is also part of the thing that I have done with many patients, where they write letters to their loved ones. And I have had to keep some of those letters until after death and then give them to their loved ones. They did not expect them. Lots of joy and tears with that. I have written stories with patients about their lives, because the good thing with hospice is the interdisciplinary approach. So while the nurses come, they care for the pain, the medications, chaplains have the honor to be able to sit and listen and write these stories. So I would, with people that were able and wanting to do that, then I would write these stories with them and present them to the family afterwards, and the gratitude, the joy that would come with that. Also for the patient or the person that is either elderly. This is not something just for terminally ill patients, but it's the elderly ones. The elderly, a lot of times they have a lot of time and they don't have very much to do. So that's a great question, is involving them in writing, telling them, let's write these stories to share with your grandchildren, and helping them write these stories. It really brings joy even to the elderly, as they feel like they still have purpose. Thank you.
Now, Anne, my ignorance is showing once again here, but if you are working at a hospice, you're working at a specific hospice? Would that be correct?
So as an employee of the hospice care, I would be working for a company. However, so hospice is a philosophy. So many times that question has come, what is hospice? And people expect that there's a place they go. But actually, hospice is not a place, it's a philosophy. Now, there are hospice houses that are designed to give a place to people in need where they can go and be until they die. However, there are very many people who choose to die in their home, and as hospice workers, we go to their homes. So hospice workers go wherever the people need them. We go to homes, we go to facilities, we go to the hospice houses to provide care to the people.
Okay.
Who determines whether someone is eligible? And I'm sure there are different types of hospice, but who determines how that actually even comes about for someone?
Right. So it's usually the doctor that starts that process. So, okay, so for example, there are diseases that are progressive, like cancer, heart disease, dementia. Many dementias are progressive. So that means they get worse over time. And as they get worse, they cannot be treated to become better. So they keep getting worse and worse. And not everybody with cancer or these diseases is terminal. So many people live with these diseases for very many years, for a long time. However, it comes to a time when the doctor determines there's nothing more we can do to help you. And usually the doctor will say, given the studies, given what we know, you have less than 6 months to live. That is when somebody is considered terminal. It's based on studies. So we see people that are given 6 months and they die in 2 months, in 2 weeks. But there's people that are given 6 months that live for a year. I have had patients for 3 years on hospice. So based on the condition, they get recertified every benefit period based on the condition. But there has to be signs of decline for them to continue to be on hospice. However, death is a strange thing, and only God can tell that. However, I have to say, doctors are usually very right most of the time, because this is something they've done over a lot of years. It's a lot of studies over a lot of years. So I encourage people, don't be afraid of hospice. Hospice is not a death sentence. Hospice care is a beautiful thing. It doesn't mean someone doesn't have faith. We faith people, I'm a faith person, have the biggest problem accepting hospice, because people sometimes can struggle with, can I still have faith in God and still take hospice care? Absolutely. Many people regret that they waited too long to accept hospice services. So when someone is told it's time, you probably would benefit from hospice, I encourage people to venture into that. We've seen people come and actually thrive because they are getting a lot of care and extra attention, and there's more people coming and seeing you and listening to you. And so we see some people thrive under hospice care. So I would encourage people to venture into it. Hospice workers are not death focused, they are life focused.
Okay. Other questions from our panelists?
What decided you to get into this?
What made me get into it?
Yeah, what decided you to, I want to get into about hospice and the elderly and all that? What decided you to, because you're not an old woman. I'm just wondering.
I'm not very young either. I'm in my midlife, and I'm grateful to be here by God's grace.
Yes.
Actually, I did not decide. I bumped into it. I was going to school and I was in my master's program when I was introduced into chaplaincy, and I decided to look into it. And then the next thing is I was introduced to a company that I had no idea what hospice care was. So I literally bumped into it, and I got employed in my first job. It was very difficult coming out of a culture that does not talk about death and does not want to hear death. It was very difficult. But thankfully, the company was really good, and I'm grateful for people that can see potential, and they were patient and guided me. And so I grew into it, and it became such a passion of mine. So now I preach it.
Are there, and I'm not sure, are there government
Well,
agencies that, are there
go ahead,
government,
Nadia.
okay, are there government agencies that help fund these home visits or places that a person can go for hospice care?
Yeah, so Medicare covers for hospice. So unless somebody either has a lot of money or very good insurance, Medicare covers for hospice. So people that qualify for hospice, it's free to them. It's a free service. That's a great question, Nandia. It's a free service. And yes, that's a question many people ask is, how do I pay for it? Please just accept it. And the hospice company comes and evaluates, and the hospice doctor evaluates. And once they see someone qualifies for hospice care, then it is paid for you.
I have to ask though too, do they keep you pretty drugged up? Somebody said they
Oh.
keep you pretty drugged up that you're kind of like, you're kind of out of it. Is that?
I would say the simple answer would be no. The goal, again, is comfort care, as well as, number one, of course, quality of life. And a part of that comfort care, making people don't have pain. The patient and their families are in charge of their care. So we don't come and impose anything on the patient or their loved one.
So, Anne, unfortunately, we do have very precise end of life parameters on this program, and we've run out of time. Unfortunately, there's so many parts of this issue to be explored, and I really appreciate your being here today. And so we're going to have to call an end to our discussion, at least for today. But I hope you've at least gotten our viewers interested in hospice care and in the chaplain role that you fulfill in that hospice setting. So thank you so much for being with us today. And Nadia, Candy, and Rashida, thank you for being panelists today. And so unfortunately, we have to call an end to things and hope that our viewers will be back next time on a different topic for another edition of Generations.